you who are here with us.
Well, thank you, Dawn. I really appreciate that. And I want to welcome everyone who has joined us today. Let me tell you, you are in for a treat. One that I have an all-star panel here today that is really, really going to provide you with some insightfulness about one critical issue that our city is dealing with. And I say one because we know that we have many challenges throughout the city and throughout the nation. But like I said, I got three all-stars here and they are rock stars, and they're going to provide you with some insightfulness about what those challenges are and also what those opportunities exist that will allow us to be able to address the challenges around this critical issue known as affordable housing or housing affordability. Today's community conversation is titled Housing Affordability, a practical discussion about the challenges and opportunities in Nashville. And like I said, I have three rock stars here that is joining us today that will engage in a very fluent conversation about the housing affordability. We have Hannah Davis from the city of Nashville. We have Tracy Crow, who is chairman of the board of the Greater Nashville Apartment Association. And we have Evan Holliday, who is president and CEO of Holiday Ventures. They bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to the discussion around housing affordability, and more specifically, how housing impacts everything that we do today. This is as I mentioned, this is a very fluent conversation where the panel members will weigh in where they feel most comfortable. So let me set the stage, and then we'll allow them to introduce themselves and then kick off this conversation. Area median family income is very real in the space of affordable housing. And HUD has determined that the area median income in Davidson County metropolitan area is $96,700. $96,700 is the area median income. And at 80%, a family of four is $75,450 is the area median income. Since 1981, HUD has indicated that 30% of family income is the standard for owner-occupied housing and the indicator of affordability for housing in the United States. Keeping housing costs below 30% of income is intended to ensure that the households have enough money to pay for other non-discretionary costs. Therefore, policymakers consider households who spend more than 30% of their income on housing costs is cost burden. So let's just think about that. So in 1981, HUD set a standard that 30% is the standard for where individuals should spend no more on their housing. If they spend more than 30%, then we're cost burden. Well, we know that the impact of our society today from an income standpoint, that 30% is a very low number. And when I was a mortgage loan officer, we know that when people would buy a house, that they would be at 34 and 36% were the income ratios. Today, some of those ratios for obtaining a mortgage is all the way up to 45%. So we have to dig a little deeper about what that 30% really means when we're talking about housing affordability. While so much emphasis on affordable housing is about the quality of housing, so many people say, not in my backyard. I don't want affordable housing in my backyard. But the real conversation isn't about housing quality. Today's conversation is about income levels and affordability. When I talk about affordable housing, what I convey is about how a person's income versus the level of profitability that somebody wants to make or trying to obtain through rent or selling their house. Are people raising rents simply because they can, or is there something else behind that? And we're going to dig a little deeper into that as well. Our focus today is on the income part of the equation, income versus profitability. We're going to let us focus on housing affordability and that income part of it to you know, identify where those challenges are and where the opportunities of being able to help everyday citizens. As we continue to focus on this, we will begin and ask our panelists to talk about something that is really having a devastating effect on our society today. With that being said, the panelists, we can't talk about affordability without mentioning inflation. A recent Wall Street Journal article talked about Nashville facing exceptional inflation from all sides. Let me just identify a few, and then I'm going to open it up and let you weigh in. A few points from the article: the significant increase in population, over 400,000 new residents to the metropolitan area of Davidson County. The increase in the cost of not only housing, but also childcare services and utilities. Median housing prices have soared record highs. The median housing price in Nashville is $423,000 compared to nationwide, where it's only $337,000 for a house. Some believe that the cost of living in Nashville is simply finally catching up with every place else. And then finally, while other races in the city of Nashville continue to increase, the Black population has declined significantly. So let's get this party started. Let's get this conversation started. We're going to start today with Hannah Davis, who is a good friend, has been a part of several have worked for several mayors, and now she has an opportunity to be able to change and make a difference. And she has done some a phenomenal job in addressing some of the issues around housing. And what I'd like to do is just start off with Hannah. If you could just talk a little bit, introduce yourself, give us some ideas about your thoughts around that inflation issue, and then we'll go to Tracy, and then we'll go to Evan to wrap up the inflation conversation, and then we'll dig a little bit deeper into some of this issue around housing affordability. So Hannah, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Marshall, for moderating today. And thanks to the Center for Nonprofit Management for hosting us, and to our other panelists. Marshall's right. We've got some great folks here today. I always want, if possible, to be able to make sure I'm speaking to the questions that people have. So I have the chat pulled up, and if there are questions that come up, we can hold any big ones to the end. But, if I mention a term or any of us speak about some, specific housing lingo, please feel free to say, hey, wait, what's that? Because we want to make sure we're addressing some of those insider baseball terms that we get in the habit of using in the housing world. So as Marshall said, I'm Hannah Davis. I was in the mayor's office for the last 2 administrations, but I'm very excited to be in our new division of housing. The planning department has graciously offered to kind of incubate us. My background was in startups, so the incubation world and the growth sector is a place that feels really familiar and exciting to me, which is the way that I kind of offset how challenging it is to address our neighbors' housing needs and kind of feel constantly like we're behind. The need is always so great. And I think especially when it comes to inflation, anytime there's dynamic changes in our economic landscape, we see those affect people at the lower end of income levels the hardest. And so, inflation obviously is a place where the less margin that you had already on your in your pocketbook at the end of every month, that squeeze gets tighter and tighter. And so when we knew that already, the bottom half of our income neighbors in Nashville were already cost burdened, like Marshall explained, up to 50%. So they already had very little room in their pocketbook at the end of the month, just there. And so inflation is pushing that. And so that makes our neighbors even more vulnerable to, risk of missing rent payment, mortgage payment, car issue comes up, and there was no margin in their pocketbooks to begin with. And so then things start getting really squeezed. So while, we already see the inflationary pressures, of course, over the last 24 months in Davidson County on housing, reflected in rates and mortgages or home prices, I view kind of the downstream of impacts of that to be ongoing, even if someone is, securely housed and has a mortgage that they could afford 3 months ago. That is a very different calculation today. And so I kind of think about this all day. I got my MBA because I love economics and feel constantly confused by it. You think, okay, raising mortgages, raising rates, which, the Fed did this week, obviously puts a lot of pressure on mortgage rates. So we see mortgage rates going upwards of 6%. So that makes, home ownership something that's now really a challenge for folks. And it also could cool the housing market a little bit, which, in the affordable housing world, it's nice to see a little bit of cooling off, but, you hate to see that primarily absorbed by some of the folks who are having the hardest time entering into the home ownership market to begin with. So I can say I'm tracking inflation all day, every day. We see it all the way through the supply chain. I heard someone today talking about the successful leaders of the next decade will be folks who figured out the supply chain. I think, we see that starting 2 years ago in lumber prices increasing and some of those first signs of inflation. But I'll just say it's challenging because, of course, you want to see the market cool a little bit so that folks aren't feeling so squeezed in every area of childcare, grocery, gas. But it's also hard to know that cooling off will, additionally impact folks who are also at the lower end of the income. So at the city level, we don't have enough data yet to totally inform, okay, here's exactly what we know about inflation, where the market's going. Certainly looking at, what can we do, to Marshall's point about, addressing down payment assistance or other things that if mortgage rates go up, we know we're going to have to step in. But I'd say we don't have enough information yet to totally adjust our policies. That's why we rely so much from our partners on the ground, as I say, for Marshall and others to be able to kind of give us that feedback so we can see trends build. I tend to say government is rarely the first mover in a space, but when we do move, we want to make sure it kind of supports some structural change or supports, places where we could see people really fall through the cracks over the next couple of years.
Excellent. Thank you, Hannah. And you touched on a few things. I made some notes that we'll definitely come back, have some clarity and some perspective on a few items there as well. Tracy, good morning.
Good morning.
Would you mind sharing with us as well? Introduce yourself, please.
First of all, my name is Tracy Crow. Thank you so much for having me today. I am so honored. A little background, I have been in multifamily industry for about 22 years in the national market. I feel like I am the market. I love everything about this industry. I'm more of a conventional market side. Now I'm getting into the affordable side just because I'm just intrigued about everything about it. In terms of inflation, from the conventional side and the affordable side, I can say with me being the boots on the ground, it's kind of like alarming to me as a asset manager. It's very difficult when I go on site and see my residents struggling. And also being, asset minded and trying to make money for my owners. It's difficult when I have to impose 30% increases on rents. And it's my job to make money, but also provide homes with realistic rents. Like, for an example, the market right now, we are very aggressive in a way that I feel like it's price gouging. So I am basically the voice for the voiceless. I think that right now, some management companies are getting 30% increase on renewals when people are coming up for renewal time. And I'm the one that says, no, let's push back. The average increase that most people should take, it should be anywhere from 4 to 8%. And now people are getting anywhere from 10 to 30%. So for the management company that I work for, I went back and said, hey, I understand that we could get 30%, but an average person, average rent's $1,000, at least for my assets. And if I impose 30%, that's $300. So if I've got a resident that's already struggling just to make the rent, I'm going to impose a $300 increase, which means that, they're going to struggle. They're going to have a late fee. They're going to possibly be evicted. And that's just not something that I feel that I want my on-site team to have to struggle with getting the rent and then having to tell someone they have to go away. So my job is with inflation is to try to find a happy medium and to honestly argue both sides. At the end of the day, we're going to get a rate of income. We're going to make money, but let's be realistic. Right now, I can tell you that for my assets, my owners believe in value adds, meaning that we take class C, maybe D assets, and we go in and we renovate to where we get it back up to maybe a class B, meaning that, we want to take this, distressed properties and resuscitate them and give people a better place to live and not the most desirable zip code. And I love that. And for that, I want you guys to kind of know that the job growth, once I use apartmentdata.com to do most of my research and statistics. And I just got the statistics back. For 2021, the job growth in Nashville was 4.7%. As of first quarter of 2022, it went down a little bit to 3.9%. But what I want you to kind of know is the occupancy or the growth in Nashville with all these cranes that you see everywhere, we are estimated at least this quarter to bring on 20,000 more apartment homes. With that, I want you guys to know the average rent's going to be about $1,500. And I don't know which, like we said, the average is 96,000 / 76,000. You're like, where are these people? These people are coming in from everywhere, but where are the people that have already been living here? Where are they going to live? So now what we're trying to readjust or pivot, I should say, is for all these properties like mine, how are we going to be able to maintain? And the thing is that I want to make sure you guys understand is that most of these management companies now are using a software program like a rent maximizer or Yield Star that basically is taking a market survey of all these new high rises, and there's a model that's like driving our sales and the rents. So what I'm trying to do is make sure that, when I have to, send my information, that I compare apples to apples. Like I want a garden style that was built in the 80s, not a garden style or a high rise that was built in 2022. So that when I get my rents are kind of like aligning the same. So that's one of the things and challenges that I make sure that when I have my calls every Tuesday at 10:30, that I make sure that I don't get a price that's pulled from something that's built in 2019 and my assets are 1965 and 1985. So I can say that as far as inflation, I am very anal with making sure that for whatever platform that I'm speaking to, that it's done fairly and everybody understands the model of what we're speaking to, because I can say that the market's doing quite well. We don't, for right now, we don't anticipate, we're going full steam ahead. And I think that for me, the scary part that everyone keeps asking me, what are you going to do to try to, keep people in homes? The best thing I know that I try to do is make sure that we try to, keep our legal fees reasonable, which, I feel like I have a really good relationship with all of my legal evictions team people and say, hey, let's try to, not have an increase. Even on the on-site management teams, like we know with our leases, let's try to not have more increases with the 10% late fees. Let's try to see if we can waive fees when we know our residents are struggling just to make the rent. Let's be a little bit more gracious. So I can say that as the regional, my managers know, hey, if we can help our people stay in these units, let's do that. So for me, I know I'm probably a unicorn, but I'm a unicorn trying to rub off on other unicorns to say, hey, let's not have these people sitting, on the street. Let's find other resources for, our people.
Wow, Tracy, that you know what, again, I've made some notes here that I want to dig a little deeper into, especially around the evictions, because we know that there was a moratorium a while ago, and now that has been lifted, and everybody again trying to talk about this issue of profitability. Are people raising rent simply because they can, or is there something else that is impacting? So I want to talk a little bit about that as well. And it's great seeing you. For those of you who don't know, Tracy and I went to college together, so it's great connecting. And we always keep saying we're going to connect, and now here we are connecting. And
We're
you're doing a
together.
phenomenal job in that space as well. But let me bring on our third panelist as well. He is no stranger. He has a podcast out there, and I hope he puts that out there for you. So, and he's been all over the newspaper here lately. He did a
Yes.
podcast with David Plattis. I mean, he wrote an article. I mean, man, please introduce yourself and welcome this morning. We really appreciate you being a part of this conversation.
Yes, thank you for having me, Marshall. And I promise I did not pay him to say all that. I'm really glad to be here. This is, I'm really passionate about talking about affordable housing, so I'm excited to be here. Thank you, everybody, for taking your time too to be here. So a little bit quickly on me and what we do. So our company is Holiday Ventures, based here in Nashville. I've been in the affordable industry, I think like 11 years now. And really found my passion for affordable housing, for quality development, intentional development, and mixing in attainable housing with a mix of incomes to create that true balanced mixed income community. And so we're working on projects throughout Middle Tennessee and Nashville, Greater Nashville. We've worked with Hannah quite a bit. I've known Marshall for a while. And so we're kind of like boots on the ground on the development side of creating new units. And so I think that's probably the perspective that I'll take on inflation. And so we typically work with THTA, MDHA, the mayor's office, with Hannah, with nonprofit partners, in creating brand new construction affordable housing. We typically use tax credits. We work with the mayor's office and Metro council members to do pilots. And so our job is to basically, from start to finish, from finding a feasible place to build affordable housing all the way through to building it, and then making sure that we're working with our property management companies to make sure it's fully leased up. So we're kind of from A to Z, but really we're focused on creating new affordable units. And really, I think with the question of affordable housing, it's always going to come down to supply and demand. I'm also a huge economics nut like Hannah. And so economics 101, it's, supply and demand. We are not building enough units for the amount of people that want to live in Nashville. And that is what's causing this massive, massive housing crisis here in Greater Nashville. And so, like Tracy said, she brought up a bunch of great points, but even with 20,000 new units in one quarter, we're still at a massive lack of affordable housing. And we will be for a long time, because the gears of the economic engine of development move very slowly. And it's like it's like the Titanic boat trying to turn. Development doesn't just uptick all of a sudden. We can't just turn on a spigot and spit out 50,000 units. Development is a long-term, long investment, high risk business. And so there's not that many people or that enough resources to match the amount of units that we need to bring on. And I think really I can't remember the number off the top of my head. I think it was 7.2 or 7.8 million units of affordable housing that were needed across the country prior to COVID. And, COVID just put a massive, kind of poured gasoline on the fire and just exacerbated the problem even more, with inflation, with people losing their jobs, people living paycheck to paycheck as if they weren't already before. And then inflation has just literally made the problem exponentially worse after that. And so with all the money that has been poured into the economy, I think, we're dealing with something that's really, I think, unseen for at least the last 20, 30 years, where we have great job employment, but yet we have a total lack of ability to get construction materials to site. Like Hannah mentioned, we're dealing with our last project we closed, was called Shelby House. we were hit with a $2.1 million increase in our lumber budget by the time we closed. We could not have foreseen that. And that's just because lumber prices literally doubled in 6 months. You can't budget for that. And so that's what we're trying to deal with on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. Our next project that we're working on now that we'll be closing here in a few months. I'm on the phone with our GC daily because he's literally telling me every day, he's like, hey, electric's up, hey, elevators are up, copper wires up, your roofing materials up, your lumber's up, all these materials constantly changing. So it's a shot in the dark to see where our numbers are going to be. We had construction costs on that project. We just got a hard bid about 2 weeks ago, come in 21% higher than we anticipated. And that is, we were trying to be conservative. We were trying to anticipate, a level of inflation into our construction costs, and we still undershot it. And so I think that's what the tough thing for us on the development side of creating new units is we're constantly playing catch up. And, we're always learning about data, like the Fed is learning about data and then they're reacting to it. So we're kind of all playing this like reaction game. And that's the toughest part about our job is we don't know, we're basically all making best guesses until we get the real data. But by the time we get the real data has changed and it's gone up significantly. Right. And so that's I think the kind of the quandary we're in right now is we need more funding. We need more availability and support for affordable housing to be able to create more units. And the limited funding we do have is now being spent on less units because the construction costs have just exponentially increased over the last 2 years. And so we're seeing this firsthand. Thankfully, we have great partners in THTA and the mayor's office and MDHA, and are helping us adjust to these drastic increases in costs. But that's, I think, the toughest thing from a new construction side is how do you keep rents affordable, and how do you be able to build that when costs are increasing by 20 to 30%. And even on the affordable side, our rents have increased, but they're on the magnitude of like 11%, but our costs are increasing by 30%. So how do we fill that gap while still providing affordable housing? And so that's been one of the toughest things on the development side. I will also speak to what Hannah's saying about the mortgage rates. We're working on our first for sale affordable opportunity for first-time home buyers at 80% AMI. And when we first started this, this was January or early 2022, and interest rates were at 3.25%. Now they've literally gone up 300 basis points to 6.25%. So how do we adjust for that within a matter of 6 months? And so that's I think the tough thing is we're trying to provide affordable housing, but a lot of things are pushing against that and making that really difficult. So I think it at the end of the day, it's going to take public and private and nonprofit partnerships and willingness to get creative to add additional funding, because I don't think there's an immediate end in sight for inflation. I think it's going to continue for a while. And that's part of the new norm. I think it will flatline at some point, or at least like get to a new median of, maybe it's 4% or something, or 3 or 4%. I don't know where exactly that is, but I think we're going to hit a new median at some point. And then we can make better decisions based off of that. But the up and down is the hardest part.
Yeah.
Evan, I can tell you that at least for my management company, when I went back to my CEO, is I told him during COVID that we needed to change our selection criteria. We needed to, because people aren't working or the cost of living has gone up, inflation, that we needed to change our selection criteria, meaning that most management companies say 3 times the rent gross would be. So now we've changed it to 2.7. So because we see that the model, the people are like shy, let's say $500 to like $1,000. And
Yes.
So what I would wind up having to do is when the manager would call me, I would override it and would require them to pay, like, let's say a higher deposit so that we could get them in. So I'm like, let's quit playing with that. Let's just change the model to where, you know, we don't have to mess with the cut points. Let's just change that. So we changed that, and now we are getting more people to qualify. And that's the thing. It's not that their credit's bad. It's just that they don't meet the income. And then
Yeah.
I also changed, I don't like student loans. I don't like medical bills. So let's take that out, because I wouldn't live anywhere right now if it was based on student loans. So that's what I challenge the investors, the owners, to like, let's reevaluate the selection criteria. And that's my little 2 minutes, my
Yeah.
bit.
I
That's
love it. I
great.
completely agree.
Yeah, let's do that.
That is awesome, because all of you have talked about situations in which the housing fund has addressed. You know, let me just give a little plug for you know, the partnerships and the opportunities that we've provided and working with other nonprofits. You talk about the cost increase there. We know that many nonprofits get resources from the Barnes Fund, but you know, those resources are obtained on a reimbursement level. So they come to us, they borrow our resources, and then once they're able to get the project and get it completed, then they're able to go and get the reimbursement from the Barnes Fund and being able to help. In addition to that, the Housing Fund owns affordable units as well. Our property in the Gulch, those rents are what I think it's $750, but it might be $800 a month in those 48 rental units right there. And there's no way that we would increase rents on that, because we know the challenges for individuals at 60% and below area median income, let alone 80% of area median income. And then we are building houses as well. We have our community land trust properties. I think we're about to finish our third one, but the first one, the costs just continue to increase. And we had to work with the GCs constantly. Hey, Marshall, you know, lumber is definitely, speaking to Evan, some of your concerns there. So we see the accumulation of all this. And I think many of you know, I sit on the board of directors for the Federal Reserve. And anything I say is not a reflection or the opinion of the Federal Reserve. This is strictly Marshall Crawford. Well, we're talking about the inflation, and you talk about the data. The data, just think about, remember, data is past tense. That's what did happen. How do you get ahead of what's going to happen and staying ahead of the game? The biggest challenge and the biggest thing that I always talk about is, you don't have to have a crystal ball to know what's going to happen to low to moderate income individuals when interest rates go up. You know, if they were already squeezed with it from an income level beforehand, then they're going to start using credit cards. And if you're raising interest rates, it's the credit cards until they max out the credit cards, and then those other factors there. And every time I hear the news, it's always a reflection on the consumer. But what about everybody who is borrowing capital, such as developers and who are borrowing money, still getting it at a low, because a lot of times they're only paying interest only. It's probably tied to LIBOR or prime, none of those factors that impact consumers. But yet the interest rate has a direct impact on consumer spending. And so we're just trying, how do we get a handle on that and perceive what's going to happen in the future? Well, this brings me to the next, a thought process in all of this, because there was several interviews in the Nashville Business Journal that talked about housing affordability, and it raised questions. And one interviewer said, there is no magic formula out there when it comes to housing affordability. Do you agree with that? Is that fact or fiction, and why? He spelled out, he talked about supply and demand, housing appreciation, interest rates, labor market, wage pressures. What are your thoughts that there's no magic formula? I'll just start it off. I think that is false and fiction. There is a magic formula. I just don't think people actually want to do things the way that it's supposed to be done to help address housing affordability. So I'd love to hear what your perspective is on that. There is no magic formula out there for addressing.
No, Marshall, you can't tell us that there's a magic formula and then not tell us what it is.
Y'all know what the magic formula is, and all of you have said it already about what that magic formula is. And it ain't just one thing, but it's a combination of things that make that magic formula work for us. So what's your thoughts and perspective on that? Oh,
I love an argument and I
good.
love to debate with Marshall because he is really smart and brings his A game. So got a good, strong battling partner. I think that I was going to say that that's fact, but I think with Marshall's definition of it's a lot of little things that he's correct. I mean, all the time I get asked who in the country has figured this out. I'm like, read the papers. Nobody, baby. If they had, we would be doing it. There are a series of tools, and that's kind of my day-to-day job is building our policies and new initiatives. And so that's kind of where I spend my day. It's like, okay, what do we know is going to move the needle? So when we look at, we need 5,000 new affordable units per year. We're at about 1,500. So I need to cover, that 3,500 gap with various tools. So we just passed a mixed income pilot, and it could do, maybe 300 units a year. So looking at kind of taking those chunks out. I'll battle Evan on the supply and demand. I think that obviously supply demand is a theory that works in most cases. I think for housing, and Evan knows this and is not trying to simplify the issue, but what we'll see is people get pushed to the very edge of the county or out of the county. And I think that can work in places. I think of housing in like a triangle of wages, transportation, and the actual physical unit. And so when we don't have the kind of dynamic transportation network that folks need, I don't feel like I can responsibly say, hey, here's a great affordable unit, 35 minutes out of town. How you get to your job is not really my problem. As a government official, I can't responsibly say that. So, I want to see transportation evolve so we do have a dynamic network, but my world being housing, I have to look at places, units that are close to job centers, close to other assets, rather than saying, yeah, you got priced out of this market, but here's this other unit, and don't worry, the assets will eventually come. And that's where I think supply demand kind of falls apart, is because you're saying to someone like, okay, well, 10 years from now, we'll kind of catch up to you. So, and I know that's not what Evan's saying, but so that's where I think government interventions are really important. And we know that economically integrated neighborhoods are like really dynamic, healthy places to live. And so that's where we're focusing our efforts as a city, trying to balance, what you see from some of your federal and state incentives is scale. We need units. Everyone needs a place to be securely housed, but we also don't want to sacrifice the long-term quality and vitality of our neighborhoods. So it's kind of trying to balance. So that this new tool we introduced, it has to be 60% of the units cannot be income restricted. And some folks said, like, why? Make it 100%. We need these units. I obviously feel that pressure breathing down my neck when I wake up in the morning, but I have to force myself to think through, right, 20 years from now, we don't want to have pushed so hard on this that then we've, economically segregated our city even further in pursuit of this kind of short-term pressure point. So I think to that, of whether there's a magic formula, there probably is. I don't know all the pieces of it yet. And I think it also depends kind of on what layer you're talking about. If it's just units, we could probably just crank those out. If we're looking at healthy neighborhoods for the long term, that obviously kind of adds another layer. And then if you're looking at asset rich, communities where the city and state are investing in transit, libraries, schools, etc. Some of those things aren't within our control totally, but we certainly have a lot of progress that we can make as a city. And I see Councilmember Van Rees is here. And so your council is an important part of that. They did approve a program that allows us to enhance infrastructure around some of our affordable housing developments. That program will be rolling out in the next month. And I'm really excited for that, because a lot of times we talk about bringing units to asset rich areas. And I also want to think, how can we bring assets to places where folks are already securely housed? And of course, my long-term goal is so that people say, like, oh man, some of these affordable housing developments bring some nice things with them. We got that traffic calming that we wanted, or we got those enhanced pedestrian infrastructure that we wanted, so that some of those community conversations can be more robust, and the community feels like we're really listening to them, and that if we are increasing density in a way that's appropriate, they're seeing assets come along with it right away.
Absolutely. And see, what you have offered is one part of the formula. You see, a formula isn't just one thing. A formula is comprised of several different aspects that make up an equation that has a solution to it. And Evan, I know that you have, and Tracy, both of you have a piece of that formula as well.
Yeah, and I'd like to say, Marshall, if you could, is that a whiteboard behind you? Could you write out the magic formula?
It's not a whiteboard behind me. I definitely can share that.
But yeah, I would like to speak to what Hannah was saying. I think she's spot on. I think the unfortunate thing about supply and demand is you will get basically the highest end units in the best locations, close to the transit, close to the amenities. And that's what we're seeing for the most part today. I think we're seeing certain developments that are providing affordable housing along major corridors, along transit, near retail. But it's tough. And that's where it takes a partnership between the government to help incentivize and provide the necessary financing. I think that ultimately to create equitable housing and enough attainable and affordable housing across the entire county, it does take, like what Hannah said, it does take a really good transportation network and a diversified across the county opportunities for job centers, for retail, for shopping, for schools, for parks. And I think that's the really complex question is, like, we're not just housing, right? Like we're building communities, and communities are more than just housing. They're everything. And so we are just one piece of the puzzle. We're the most direct piece, but there's so many other pieces that play into that. And so I think really if Nashville and Davidson County are going to actually make a dent in the affordable housing, I think it takes a community-wide conversation. And I think it takes probably 50 different tools in order to be able to make that happen. I think like Hannah said, being able to offer the mixed income pilot, which Hannah worked hard on and council passed recently, that's a great tool to be able to offer, from 75% AMI or 50% to 75% up to market rate. And so we can do mixed income communities. And that's something that other cities have done previously, and it's worked well. So being able to model that is a great tool that us as developers look at and say, hey, that's another way that we can provide mixed income quality housing. But I think it's going to take many more tools. I think it's one of the biggest barriers to entry that I see on the development side is risk. And so we're talking about development process that takes 5 years from the idea, like the conception of an idea of building affordable housing, to 100% leasing up and filling it with families that are living in the affordable housing.
Yeah.
That's 5 years. So what we're working on today, that we close on and start construction today, that will take 3 years. It takes 2 years of pre-development where we're working through, that's entitlements, that's zoning, that's politics, that's working with the community, that's the design, that's the permits, that's aligning all the financing, all the different grants and tax credits and bonds, and every single thing that we need to pull together. That's at least 2 years. And then it takes us 3 years to build it and lease it up. And so that's a really long process. So there's not many groups that want to take all that risk and risk their capital, risk their time, risk their energy, and go through that 200-step process to be able to build affordable housing. And so if there's any ways that we can tear down the barriers to affordable housing, and tear down and basically lower the risk, right? If you lower the risk, you incentivize more developers or more people to get into affordable housing development. And so a couple of the barriers that I see are timing. It takes forever to go through entitlements, to go through permitting. If there's any way that the city can help expedite that, or even proactively, one thing I've seen other cities do successfully is proactively rezone or allow for higher density along major corridors if there is affordable housing, or just for affordable housing. I know that's tough in Tennessee, but anything that basically removes the rezoning process, at least on major corridors, is a huge win. That takes 1 to 2 years for us to rezone a property. And it's also a big risk, because what if they say no,
You don't know.
and then you've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on a property, and then you have to, give it all up. So that's one barrier. Also the costs, now we're paying for water, sewer, tap fees, permit fees. We're paying north of $1 million in tap fees for a project. So that's another risk that we're carrying on, another cost that we're taking on. That's thousands of dollars per unit that basically just we have to somehow figure out how to pay for with additional grants or additional government funding. So I think, looking at it as an entire package of saying, how can we lower the barriers? Another thing I've seen other states do, and we've done it in other states, is we have a pilot, a payment in lieu of tax. We lower our real estate taxes while we're operating the affordable community, but other states are able to do a sales tax exemption. So basically, Tennessee has one of the highest sales tax in the country, and it's like 9.25% or somewhere around there.
Yeah.
If we were able to remove that or partially remove that sales tax on affordable projects only, that would be a huge cost saver for the construction up front. We typically will spend, on our next project, we'll probably spend $15 to $20 million on materials. So if we could save $1.5 to $2 million, that allows for a more affordable community or less grants that we have to go out and find to be able to pay for that. So I think there's many different pieces that we could pull into the formula, but I think it's going to take looking at how do we lower the barriers to getting into affordable, to creating affordable, and then also keeping existing affordable.
Tracy, you have thoughts around that magic formula as well?
Okay, my thought is more on the boots on the ground level. I think that one thing that I see that is a challenge is having the talent, the boots on the ground to be able to run your assets, find the talent that knows how to do the research, knows how to run your affordable, know how to onboard, know how to run your assets has been a challenge. I can say not having the right talent. I'll give you an example. I usually go through all of the the LI, all those courses that we do through the GNAA. I do those just because I want to stay relevant. But when I'm in those classes, I see people looking like deer caught in the headlights. There's not enough education put out there, and it's not made. It's not as how can I say? It needs to be. The platform needs to be out there like how it is for conventional, because I feel like because it's hard, it's very challenging, but it's still rewarding at the same time. And I feel like, it's not as glorified as being an on-site conventional manager at a high rise. And I feel like the affordable is just as rewarding as being a conventional manager. And there's not enough of affordable managers out there. And they're overworked and they're tired. And for an example, the average affordable manager has 3 to 4 assets in Nashville, and they're tired. And it's a lot. I went to one asset that I was just helping out at, that they were going to be losing their accreditation, and they hadn't done their accreditation since 2019. And we're literally working to 11, 12 o'clock at night, trying to get people to come in. And literally I'm knocking on doors, trying to get them to get their paperwork. And I'm trying to figure out, making sure that I'm doing what I need to do to make sure that this owner doesn't lose, their funding. So for me, where I'm looking at for 2023 with the education that I'm over for 2023 for the GNAA is how can we better the affordable housing education and getting people to come in and buy in and want to be a part of, getting jobs, because the jobs are literally sitting there 108 days and they don't have these jobs filled. So for me, I'm going back trying to recruit and find people to go in these positions. Mm-hmm. So that's for me, that's what I'm focusing on, is when Evan says, hey, if you were to reach out to us to put a job ad in, I want to be able to say, here's 3 resumes right now, they're ready to go. So that's my angle for me adding to the formula.
Absolutely. And talent, is a part of that formula. You know,
It
we have to
is.
have the right people in the right places who are thinking bold about what we can do and how we can get it done. And I saw somebody put in the chat about what's happening in San Diego. You know, I worked for 13 years for NeighborWorks America, and I've been over this entire country, and it's amazing to me. But everybody in their own state always have a problem. You know how in your own house, you know, you look at things in your own house and you see all the problems and all the issues and all the concerns, and you're always saying, but the person next door has this and has that and has everything, and thinks that they have it gone. But then you go over to their house, you be like, man, they got the same issues that we have over here.
Yes.
And so we're always talking about what we're not doing right, instead of talking about what we are doing right and how bold we are. And I'll tell you one thing that we did get right was the Affordable Housing Task Force coming up with
Yeah.
some great ideas and some great solutions. And I think some of those things are being put in place. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about that, Hannah. And let's talk about what we are doing, because there's a lot of people. We have over 44 people that are a part of this conversation. And a lot of them don't know the great things that we are accomplishing and what we are getting right. And let's share a little bit about what we are doing right so that they have a good understanding of that. Because a lot of times, yep, we can go to San Diego, and I think the chamber just went there. They talked about best practices. We went to Charlotte, we looked at, and there's a lot of things that they tell us the exact same things. We haven't figured out how to get this right either. And everybody, but yet they were able to showcase the things that they are getting right and how they are doing some things right. And people think that we're not addressing the affordable housing issue, or we're not addressing housing affordability or attainable housing. There's a lot that's going on in Nashville that we are doing right, and we are trying to move in it. It just gets even more devastating because of so many more people coming in. Just think about if nobody else came to the state and we built all of this just for the people that we have, it still wouldn't be enough. You know what I mean? It still would not be enough. But let's just talk a little bit about the Affordable Housing Task Force and those recommendations and some of the things that are being put in place and how they are mitigating some of the barriers that Evan is talking about and some of the talent that Tracy is talking about as well.
Absolutely. I will always take a chance to get to share about what this incredible group did last year. And I echo that so much. We had a technical assistant with us in 2022 and 21. And I told her like 90%, she was extremely knowledgeable. 90% of the value was just her saying like, everyone in the country is having the same problem. Everyone in the country is working on this specific issue. I'm like, okay. And I was pretty sure we were right at the edge of devastation there. And she's like, no, everyone's working through this. So first of all, so I joined in 2019, and back then I was managing the Barnes Fund. And so that is one of the best things that this city has ever done. Thank God that Housing Trust Fund started in 2013. You know, I get calls, you know, a couple times a month from other jurisdictions just now trying to start one, and, you know, encourage them. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking like, whoo, if you're just now starting one, you know, you've got a ways to go. So many kudos. That was under the Deed administration, but really reflected a ton of advocacy from folks, you know, on this call and throughout our community. There's been a very strong housing advocacy and nonprofit community here for decades that has really laid the foundation for a lot of what we're seeing come to fruition now. So I always want to give kudos to them. And the fund is named after Reverend Bill Barnes, who was an important part of that group. So the Barnes Housing Trust Fund is grants to nonprofits. They partner with for-profits in important ways to extend their capacity, but that's pretty much how it works. And so, you know, from 2013 to when I came on in 2019, that was really what we had. And since I joined, we had $26 million. We're about to cross over $100 million. And so many thanks to all the mayors, all the councils for funding that. But, you know, that's kind of a specific tool, grants to nonprofits. So the housing task force last year came together. There was about 25 people, and you know, practitioners wanted to keep it small enough so that we were able to actually like get into the granular reasons that there were bottlenecks somewhere. Because that's what we wanted, kind of a 1 to 3 year roadmap of things that we could unlock to be able to move the city forward. We're engaging in a longer term housing strategy that will, get then into details on geography and various AMIs and how we layer funding. But like I said, I knew there were things that we needed to do right away, and this group helped guide what those were. So there were 9 high priority recommendations. I'm really excited that we've been able to make progress since this wrapped a year ago this week. The Barnes Housing Trust Fund, they recommended taking that to a $30 million a year level. We were able to do that last year, and the grants are under review now for $20 million that were put out through RFP. So, and there's always been a question, is there that kind of appetite in town? Can our nonprofits do that? The more money that's put out there, the more creative, interesting partnerships, scaled projects, premier locations, transit access that we'll be able to see. So I just always reinforce, you will see this community step up to be able to put together developments that can utilize that funding. The next one was for department and data. And so really excited, we started our new data analyst this week. I am not someone who's a data analyst. So I, for one, am very excited to get to have Casey on our team, Casey Ensign. I have told her that I'm going to hide her for a month because we had some specific data tools that she's putting together. But she started this week, fantastic, actually worked at the Virginia Housing Authority doing the same work and had to relocate here for a partner's job. And so huge win for us as a city. And then department, to me, like I said, I really think the form should follow the function. So by being able to be incubated in the planning department, we can kind of see what's needed. If it does need to become a department in order to deliver the functions that the city needs, then we can explore that. The unified housing strategy will really help determine that as well. But there's also a ton of lift when you start a new department. I don't know if anyone started a new company, but you get your HR, legal, blah, blah, blah. Thankfully, Director Kemp and planning are letting us kind of draft off of their back office. And so we are able to put all of our energy into our housing policy and our housing work. An important part of this was bringing on, my background has not been in housing the way that some of the folks on here, Marsh has been in this for 30 years, I think. Our new director, Angie Hubbard, has as well. And she importantly had 10 years at MDHA, which is our kind of federal counterpart here locally. And so she really understands all of the funding that Barnes often gets paired with, and then really understands some of the ways that our city needs to improve to meet fair housing obligations and to make sure that we're compliant with where HUD not only has been, but is kind of projecting that they will go. That was not a background that I had, and the HUD acronyms were like alphabet soup to me. The next one was new revenue sources. That is something that we are looking at. Currently, things are obligated through the general fund. And so there's kind of that annual review of what's going to be available. One way to get around that was by launching the mixed income pilot. And that enters into long-term agreements with developers so we can have long-term housing security for residents. So both sides are kind of putting our future fates together. The next one was a catalyst fund. So grateful for the Federal Reserve sending money, or to the feds for sending money to us through the ARP dollars. So we used 20 million of that to put in as first loss capital in a fund that will focus on being really quick to kind of preserve stuff. So, when you see a news story about an apartment building going up for sale, the Barnes Fund is not able to really move quickly. The government, like I said, is going to be the one out there wheeling and dealing. And in some ways, you don't want them to be. You want that strong stewardship and oversight, fair processes for managing our funds. But we just released the RFP. It went live this week for that fund manager. And so we'll be bringing on someone to manage that and then also work to recruit additional funding in that. We know that, you know, our corporate partners throughout the city are very worried about this issue. And so we want to give them a place to write a check to reflect that concern. The next one is public
Anna,
land.
real quick,
Yes.
sorry to butt in. That's really exciting about the Catalyst Fund. I did want to ask, you mentioned for like existing apartments that are coming online. What about, is there any opportunity for the Catalyst for new construction or for land to compete with market rate developers?
Yeah, the fund manager is going to help us set those guidelines. So I had this when I went in front of the ARP committee. I hate being obscure with public dollars because I want people to understand, here's what the purpose we said and here's how we can be measured against that. I think preservation is one of the areas where we're the weakest. So that's why that rises to the top kind of that priority, so that we don't see the displacement that Tracy has really highlighted here today. But it doesn't have to only be that. So we'll kind of set criteria to say, you know, these deals get the most importance. But, you know, certainly when you see an Oracle announced everything on Dickerson Pike, you know, doubled.
Yeah.
We don't want to then say, well, that's only something that's occupied. Occupied might get preference, but, you know, any land that's purchased, you know, could qualify as well. Then the Catalyst Fund, really excited about that. Public land, the departments, each, you know, Metro Schools, Metro Water, they have their own kind of land directories. And so the city's been working to centralize those so that we're able to understand what is available, what has no long-term planned use, and what would be appropriate for housing. So we want to build on empty land, and then also co-location with other assets. To my earlier point about, you know, if the health department needs a new building, how can we take the, you know, 8 stories above it that are allowable through air rights, build housing on it, and then also bring an updated housing facility to that neighborhood. State policy is another one, much longer conversation, whole 2-hour thing. But we are really lucky in THDA. They're our state housing finance authority, and they are fantastic partners, always available when we need them. And they have even been working with us on ways to utilize the federal funds that have come through them.
But also,
The pilot was one of the recommendations, and it was passed. Yes.
Hey, Hannah, let me just add, you talk about state policies, you know, one of the best state policy is the community investment tax credit. For so long, that has been a great resource for nonprofits working with financial institutions to be able to provide capital at prime -4 or prime -2. We know that prime rate has increased, but still, where can I still get capital where, you know, right now I'm paying 25 basis points on the capital that I'm borrowing or being able, and they're able to get, you know, CRA credit. So some of those state policies that a lot of, you know, individuals that are not involved in the development or in the affordable housing from that side of it even realizes that those resources are available to be able to take advantage of, in addition to the low income housing tax credit. And now I know there's some changes being made to even new market tax credit, to whereas housing could be utilized, that they can utilize those for housing as well, especially if it's mixed income or mixed use properties, being able to use new markets. So you have some of these policies that I think are really critical that the normal everyday individual doesn't know anything about.
Amen. Yes, I'm glad you pointed that out, because I actually didn't know how rare that was until I researched when we were putting together the Catalyst Fund scope. I, you know, was looking at peer cities, and theirs are all really loans. And I thought, well, why wouldn't they want to do equity? So then, you know, you can access more debt. And then I realized, oh, they don't have CITC. So they are, you know, they're paying market rate for their debt. And so anything at a lower rate is beneficial.
Absolutely.
And then the last two are really the purview of our partners. One is zoning. And the state of Tennessee zoning, any kind of entitlement cannot be linked to any kind of affordability. So especially now that we're in the planning department, we make sure there's, a very distinct line between our work. But there's always, if you talk to anyone at planning, there's always a desire to continually evolve our land use policies. And then the last one is to invest in the envision process and improve the impact of vouchers. That gets a little bit into the weeds of housing, but for the folks on the call here, I would certainly encourage you to look at the envision process that our housing authority has undertaken. And you can even go over to Casey Homes over in District 5, right across downtown. And the construction there, you get to see what the barrack style housing that existed previously that was really not reflective of the dignity that our neighbors deserve. And then what's being built, there's kind of enough of what's being built so that you can see the diversity of offerings, and that's all mixed income as well. So in an attempt to bring more economic integration to our neighborhoods, I think it's some of the most important work our city is undertaking. And MDHA has a new director with Dr. White, who's just a really bold leader, and I think an important leader for MDHA during this time. So that's always my plug for that work. MDHA is great partners.
Yeah, so there are some great tools that are being developed to actually help move the needle on this. And you talked about those vouchers. I would love to hear, Tracy, how does that impact your work and what you're doing, because vouchers are critical. And we know that a lot of people want to take advantage of that, but there are a lot of landlords and a lot of places that are saying, you know what, I don't want to use the vouchers. How is that impacting, the residents and individuals who are trying to get into apartments and trying to keep those affordable as well, and to prevent some of these evictions from happening?
Well, what I can say is what's unfortunate, I'm sorry to say this on the call, guys, is that the properties that I currently oversee, I have 7 properties in Nashville that I oversee, and unfortunately, I don't take vouchers. But I do make sure that when people call, prospects call, we have a list of what properties in Nashville take vouchers. And we see now more often with conventional properties, we don't take vouchers. So now, and I have to give a great shameless plug, Elmington properties they have a lot of affordable housing that take vouchers. So we now are trying to streamline it there, but there's not enough apartment communities right now, in my opinion, that take vouchers. And then the vouchers that some of my residents are getting still aren't enough to be able to afford to pay the rent. And, and that's inflation again. I feel like, we need to, reevaluate with the way that these rents are increasing. We need to increase the vouchers because, so I had one lady said all she had was $400 and, and the rent's $1,300. And she still, even with her income, because she's on a fixed income, she still couldn't meet the income requirement. So, at the end of the day, that's why I had to look at maybe we need to change our requirements with our income. So we're trying to work with it, at least with Line Real Estate, we now want to look into what that looks like for us to accept vouchers, to see what our requirement would be, with the state, to see if, when they come in, inspect, do all that. Because at the end of the day, we want, as they say, a head on a bed. We want to be full. And now it's a situation where, with supply and demand, all of my assets are 95% and above, but my owner says, I want to be 100%. Okay, if you want to be 100%, let's look into these vouchers, because at the end of the day, everybody wants to put a negative, connotation on the vouchers, but these are real people that need really nice homes to live in. And there's nothing wrong with that. So for me, I'm all about, let's get the vouchers. Let's figure out what that looks like to, get all these people in and be 100%. So we are actually looking into that. So for me, what I do is I go in and I try to figure out what it looks like even with affordable housing. For me, I like to have dual positions. I don't want to just be a conventional manager. I now want to deep dive into what affordable housing looks like so that I can be the best leader and mentor for that and bring people in. So for me, I need to look at what the voucher means, what's the requirement, what does my owner have to do in order to be able to be qualified for that, so that all of my assets can grow. And for me, that's one less problem I have on all my assets. So when I learned that component, then I'm able to go back to other management companies and say, hey, this is what Line Real Estate's doing. This is actually a win for us. And that's the thing. We don't have enough people wanting to learn and grow in an area that they feel like, oh my God. And that's the thing. People are scared. And you can't be as scared to grow. It's like I tell people, you can't. Like, stretch me to grow. It's always the things I don't want to do are the things that I'm told I'm going to do. So that's my take on it. And that's, for me, affordable housing is our new normal. It is. And, we need to get with it, and I've always been intrigued by it, but I've always been pulled into conventional. And now I feel like, affordable housing is the new conventional.
Yeah. Wow. You know what? There's a whole lot to unpackage that. I would love for you and Dr. White to sit down and have a conversation. And then
absolutely,
being that you only manage 7 properties, but you're over this apartment,
I have
association.
130,000 units that I have to make sure all of my investors and management companies come to me with their concerns,
So how do we make that connection with Dr. White and sitting down, having a conversation, or bringing them to the table with the owners of these particular units and being able to say, how do we address this situation to whereas more of those apartment units provide an opportunity. We're not saying you have to have it 100% vouchers, but how do you, in every apartment unit that we have in the city, that they allow at least 20 to 25 of them to be, set up on a voucher system. I would love to figure out how we make that connection with Dr. White to talk through that.
I host, sorry guys, I host a multi-executive council meeting every quarter. So the next quarter, I will devise that. I'm sure everybody knows who Kirby Davis is. Kirby Davis is, I will say, one of the reasons why I'm in this industry. He's been one of my mentors for the last 20 years. And he is somebody that I could have at the table that would get this conversation started with regards to affordable housing, because he has been honestly a staple with that. And he would definitely be able to bridge and be able to figure out how we could all come together to get these management companies or these owners and investors to be able to say, hey, could you give me 10 units? Could you give me 20 units if it's new construction, to see what that looks like? And I would be more than happy to be that voice to get that dialogue started. And with the meeting that we have, it's just a 2-hour meeting. We could do a breakfast, we could do a lunch, and we can actually have the developers like Tony Garatana. I could have him come sit down with us because he's a big developer. He's another person that is influential that could definitely give us a well-rounded view. So just make the phone call, Marshall. We can make it happen.
And you got a developer right here on the line. He's influential.
Look at Evan. Look at Evan.
Evan,
Exactly.
Believe me.
So,
let's make it happen.
There it is. And then you got Hannah right here with the new.
Look at Hannah. So this is such a blessing. I have to say.
It is.
This is how it works.
Because the magic formula isn't just one size fits all. The magic formula includes so many different elements. That's what creates a formula. A formula isn't just one piece or one aspect of it. There are so many parts that come together, and we know all of those parts. We just got to put them together and get them in a room where they're talking collectively to one another so that we can actually provide a solution around housing affordability. And having a developer at the table that says, yes, I want to do this, figure it out. This is, he mentioned the barriers, he mentioned the risk. What we got to do is mitigate some of that. How do we mitigate those barriers and that risk and allowing it to be able to do, whether it's ownership or it's rental? All of it is comprised of housing. And what people are saying is that we need housing that is affordable to our income levels that allow us to do what we need to do. And so it is critical for the impact that we're trying to have here as well. This is some good dialogue. We're going to take 10 more minutes, and then we're going to spend 30 minutes of addressing questions and asking. I see that somebody from Gilead's Army has their hand raised. I will get to your hand in just a moment. Give us just 10 more minutes to share a little bit more information, and then we will approach that. So in wrapping this up in just our dialogue, this is what I want to put out there, because I think everybody is. How do we do this for Nashvillians? We said there is over 400,000 new residents that moved into Nashville, and there is no shortage that even more people are going to move into Nashville. But a lot of people feel like the Nashvillians, people who have lived here for so long, are being shut out of this housing conversation. I know Hannah spoke about preservation a little bit. We're talking now about rents, but we're talking about all the development that's happening. And it seems to be for everybody except people that have lived here for so long, whose income is not. How do we address that housing affordability issue for residents that have lived here and their incomes just have not been able to increase at the same level of those individuals that are moving into the city? Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to this. I would say I think I've been working in Nashville for maybe 8 years now. And what I've seen has always worked best has been strong leadership at the community level. And specifically in this case, council members. I've always seen that we have the most success creating attainable housing and accessible, affordable housing when we work hand in hand with a council member that understands the need for affordable housing and is able to help convey that message to the community. Because the biggest thing that, it's such a weird dynamic, because you're right, there's a lot of families that have lived for generations here in Nashville that are being priced out. And they're currently in houses that maybe their family bought 20 years ago or 30 years ago that they wouldn't even be able to afford today at today's prices. And usually, or in some cases, those same families are against new construction, are against the affordable housing being built, in their community or around the corner. And that's kind of the weird kind of quagmire that we're all in, because I think ultimately more quality affordable housing will help those same individuals or will help people they know. But ultimately it's tough for them, because they're like, hey, I already have a place to live, or hey, I live in a house that I can't afford, but they can really only afford it because they've lived there for generations, or the house has been passed on to them. But yet they push back against new affordable housing. And so I think that's the tough thing. And that's where it takes strong community leadership by a council member or a community leader or a nonprofit leader who understands the benefits of affordable housing and how it will actually benefit the community, benefit those same families. And a lot of cases, they could potentially apply for and qualify for the affordable housing and could benefit from the affordable housing. Instead of, if they move out, they could be paying 50 to 75% of their income. Whereas if they could live in affordable, they'd be paying 30% of their income. And so I think having that candid, open conversation over, usually takes, it's not, a one and done, it's usually an ongoing conversation. But I've always seen that it takes strong leadership from good council members or nonprofit leaders or community leaders that help get that conversation going, because those are the leaders that the community ultimately trusts and they look up to for advice and support and leadership in these, unique circumstances where the city is changing so quickly.
Good deal. Hannah, Tracy, any thoughts there? No? Okay. Hannah, you good?
I have probably too many thoughts.
No.
I just want, ownership is valued, of course, in our country, and really is only in Tennessee, so much primacy is given to ownership. And so I'm really trying to think about, okay, this is such an economically volatile time, but it's also a time when we have resources from the federal government. And what can we do to try to move some folks into ownership? And, it might look different. It might be, Habitat's now doing condos, townhomes. They turned out beautifully, but that's a step away from their single family model here in Davidson County. So it's going to be an evolution of how we've thought about ownership. But, we've had decades of racist housing policy in this country. And, I think affordable rental is so important so that someone can get to the financial place where they could qualify for home ownership, for mortgage. But, we're also going to have to do a lot to rectify the racist housing policies that pushed people out and excluded them from home ownership. So, again, balancing that like scale and long-term impact. You can pour all your money into rental, but for folks to really have housing security, not just at a price point, but to feel like this is a community that's as invested in me as I have been in them. For the folks who have been here, legacy residents, home ownership is more expensive, but I just think that our neighbors deserve it. And so I was at a conference recently, and to Tracy's point about student debt, they were talking about the way that they're relooking at mortgage ratios based on student debt. There was so much creativity, and a little bright spot here that I remind myself of almost every day. Guy there from San Francisco Finance Housing, he said the down payment assistance in San Francisco is $500,000. So I was like, hey, okay, we're not San Francisco. So, but that's where I'm thinking, I know we see the Biden administration placing a lot of emphasis on first-time home ownership, especially for Black and brown families. That's just such a crucial part of people having real housing security, being able to own their homes. And not everyone wants that or is at the place for that. Maybe they don't want to stay here long-term, but that is something that I have to push myself. Our director, Angie Hubbard, is really focused on that as well. It's more expensive, but it is a long-term payoff, and it's for people who, have already invested a lot in the city.
Yeah. And one of the things that we've been doing with our shared equity program is making that, available. And the biggest problem that a lot of people are having is that they're outbidded on houses and the housing expense. So the housing fund has been buying properties and then making it available to low to moderate income individuals.
That's good.
Whereas they get a mortgage at a 74% loan to value, which makes it now cost effective for them. And now they're not pushing up against that 30%, but it's a more reasonable. And yeah, interest rates have definitely increased, but you know what? Interest rates weren't going to stay that low forever. It's almost like the sale at Dillard's. You go to Dillard's and those pants are like $40. You just wait next week and that price will come down. They'll be on that other rack over there. Sometimes, but we knew that being low, it wasn't always. I just think interest rates are normalizing, and the impact that it's having is that, again, we still can get people in housing at the current interest rates. Now, when they get up to 10, 13, or 14, I remember years ago, they were at interest rates were 18%, on buying a house, and it made it very difficult. So it's still a great opportunity, but the challenge that you're having is housing appreciation is making it difficult because everybody is trying to get maximal for that unit. And believe me, I'm not taking anything away from them. Yep, make as much as you can, but the thing is that I'm in a position to buy units, whether they're new construction units or whether they're current units, and rehab them and then put them on the market and make it available for individuals to still get into home ownership. If you don't know this, you know it now. I am all for home ownership for the simple fact home ownership allows to create generational wealth for that family going forward, whereas apartments, that's really for the developers and the owners of those units to have their generational wealth. So home ownership is definitely a peak. I really appreciate this awesome conversation that we have, but we have some questions in there, and I'm going to start off with the very first one that happened so early on, talking about, hey, Evan, someone is asking a question about green construction. And what is that? And what does that look like? And is there greater opportunities? Because somebody says that's a part of this formula is green construction. Can you speak to